to take off the air as soon as we started putting it on. And they kept changing the nights that it would go out. It would go out on different nights each week, so people had to hunt for this thing. It was like hunter-gatherers on television trying to find comedy. And people would have to search through the Radio Times and find at the last moment it had been shifted. By the fourth week, we were replaced by the International Horse Show of the Year. But somehow, by then, we had made enough noise and either impressed or disturbed enough people that there was a groundswell to keep us on the air, and off we went. And the great thing at that time was the BBC would just let people get on with whatever they were doing. They didn't interfere, unlike American television, most other television systems. They would, once they said yes to it, they would let you off, and unless you did something really terrible, like blow up television center, they stayed away. And we were able to develop enough momentum that it carried on. And it was a nice time because we only, again, had to please the six of us. We didn't have a producer that we had to check everything with and say, please, sir, may we, or we didn't have to explain to anybody why we were trying to do something that involved, a man laying down in his wine cellar, vats of wee-wee for years. It's things like that, because so much of Python was totally infantile. It was either very intelligent or very, very childish. And a lot of it we could never, if we were forced to, justify why we were doing it, except that it made us laugh. And I don't think that situation really applies now in television. There are too many people with too many vested interests to try to limit things. So we were allowed to blossom at a time when things were very free. And it was great. The difficulty was that we had to produce a half hour each week, and that requires an incredible amount of work. For me and my animations, I literally worked 7 days a week, and during that week there were probably 2 all-nighters to try to produce this stuff. And I think that's probably why some of it's pretty weird, because at 3 in the morning, things start happening. The pieces of paper start talking to you. and I think the foot comes in, because very late at night, when everything is going very badly, all you want to do is crush everything in your way. It became a very strange time, but out of that came some interesting work, because I think if we had had more time and more money, we might not have done such interesting things, because a lot of what we did was just trying to fill up a half hour. We had to come up with something, and you'd say, if we had had more time, we wouldn't have done this, but we didn't have time, so we just threw it in, and it turned out to be wonderful. So oftentimes, some of the best work is the stuff that you don't recognize at the moment you're doing it. It's only afterwards you realize it was better than I thought. Better, in fact, than I was actually capable of doing. What else can I tell you about Python?
What do you think those early audiences made a new kind of comedy? I mean, they've never seen anything.
Well, no, the only audience that was particularly bizarre was the very first one, because they'd gotten the BBC had gotten around to shortening the title. Monty Python's Flying Circus was too long and cumbersome, so they just called it the Flying Circus. And the very first audience, I think, was a group of people who came. There were a lot of old people who came in on buses to see a circus on television. And suddenly there's men, dressed as women shrieking around the place and things blowing up. And that was the only time stunned silence faced us. And they had no idea what they were watching. And they didn't come the next week. And luckily we did better the next week. But that was the advantage of being a gang of 6. Because when it didn't work and we still liked it, we said, we'll still put it on. We don't care. We like it. We're going to force this down the throat of an unsuspecting audience. And that's the advantage of working within a group. And one of the reasons we called it Monty Python's Flying Circus is we didn't want to be known individually within the group. We just wanted it to be a group activity, and this overall name covered it. It wasn't John Cleese and company. It wasn't Graham Chapman. It was this nameless group of people, and that was very good, because it was totally democratic the way we functioned. There was no leader in the group. Everybody did what they did, and when we read the stuff out in the group meetings, if it got laughs, it went in. If it didn't get laughs, it didn't go in. It was very simple, and we cut through a lot of the normal complications that would be involved in trying to do a television show. We just got cut right to the quick, which was the material. Was the material good or was it not good? And there were no other considerations.
So I sort of created the main group that was John and Graham, who were more logical.
Yeah, John and Graham and Eric tend to be right brain, or is it left brain people? I never get that one right. They were the logical ones. They tended to be more logical, more structured, where Mike, Terry, and I tended to be more conceptual and more freeform and much nicer people. Cambridge, I've seen what comes out of Cambridge. They seem to breed people who are basically defensive. I think they probably undermine people's confidence, and so the best way you deal with your undermined confidence is to become aggressive. It's the best form of defense, and that's what I think they produced in Graham, John, and Eric, where Mike and Terry from Oxford, a more humane kind of place, were nice guys, and I, who didn't, I was never punished with British education. I didn't have that problem. So much
of the material is so vital because of the sort of polarization of people's views. These guys would argue with these guys about what they like in a sketch.
Yeah, I think that does help. If we'd all been the same kind of person, nothing would have come of it. And by having these warring factions, it kept it very lively. Let's. Well, I probably made, when I say throw together, I probably lied. The stuff, what happened is we would have sessions well in advance of the shows when we would go through all the material we'd come up with. Basically, the way a series of Python would work, there are 13 shows, and we'd sit down and write lots of material. We had lots of material. Then we'd go in and have meetings and decide this is good, this is bad. Then we'd try to organize it into that show. These things kind of relate, that kind of relates. So we'd start building up piles. And long before the shows were either rehearsed or recorded, we decided what the show was. So it was all scripted. The free-form part happened earlier, and then we would rehearse it and do it as scripted. So really there was very little improvisation or ad-libbing when we got around to doing the shows. That was done much earlier. So the films were the same way. We were able to do them as quickly and cheaply as we did because we were very organized and in fact, very professional. And we would go in there and you could knock out a sketch in a day very quickly, or even less than a day, because everybody had rehearsed, knew what they were doing. There were very few times where we had to improvise, and oftentimes they were the most enjoyable because they broke this regime of organization. It was, people at the time thought we were just faking it all the time. We weren't. We faked it early on, but by the time we got around to actually doing it technically on film or tape, it was very much under control.
Did Robin Williams improvise a lot?
I wouldn't say a lot. He improvised, though. I mean, yeah, but what Fisher King was, again, it was very carefully scripted. And what happened, there would be certain scenes, particularly the manic ones when Robin was really flying, that he would say, I think I can do something more here than what's in the script. I think I can. And he doesn't really know what's going to happen. The wonderful thing about Robin is that he's got this extraordinary mind that is able to pull information from all sources and then juxtapose it and recombine it in ways that are really unimaginable to the rest of us. And he sort of opens that valve and sees where it goes. He doesn't know where it's going to go. So what would happen, we would do several takes as scripted, and then you could feel this monster inside of him is trying to get out and be heard. You know, me sir. And I said, okay, we'll do a couple takes and see what happens. And he would go and let fly. And if it came up with something better, we would keep it in. If it didn't, we'd say, all right, that nice try, didn't work, and we get back to the script. It wasn't really a problem with that. It's just, there were some very nice moments that came out of ad-libbing with Robin. But a lot of that, again, was done in rehearsal. We rehearsed for 2 weeks in advance on the film. So a lot of ideas came out then. And again, because when you're making a film, it's such a complicated process. There's so many departments. It's like a big army of people. And they all have to know what's going on. And what you do is you plan for a lot of possibilities. You know exactly what you're setting out to do. But you know that probably won't work quite